Hello from my home to yours. Welcome to EMS at Sea Level. I am joined by Emily Laird, a fellow podcaster. Emily, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Philip. I really appreciate it.
We are fresh out of the election. We can talk a bit about the use of AI in elections at some point, but yeah, long day yesterday. So nice to, for the industry at least, and most industries, nice to at least have a decision made and that in the rearview mirror, so people can plan forward. I wanted to start just by getting a brief introduction to you and kind of
Yeah,
what led you to the Generative AI 101 podcast.
absolutely. Great question. So, my background, I am an AI integration technologist at the university that I work for. And then I also am a lecturer here that I teach foundational AI, and then I also teach generative AI for writing and communication. I also work with cancer research as the vice president of business development space. And then oh gosh, there's so much. And then I also do consulting in industry
Mm.
spaces, helping folks bring generative AI into their spaces or making connections at the university I work for to bring in AI and automation into their spaces. So it's a
Okay.
quite diverse range.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, those manufacturing episodes are what really drew me in. But
Yeah.
I've stayed for everything else. So it's interesting. It
Yeah.
did exactly the job, and I really like that they're these short, punchy podcasts. There's kind of a bit of your view on what's going on in that particular sector. The
Yeah.
finance ones were interesting from that point of view because it felt like there was a personal connection there. Um, when you look specifically at manufacturing and in your work that you're doing in consultancy, have you
Yeah.
have you had the opportunity to do much in the manufacturing space?
That is actually one of the most high demand spaces that I get. So like tomorrow I will be at a manufacturing space doing a keynote for a large group of businesses also in the manufacturing, agriculture, hospitality, and medical industries. So, but manufacturing always seems to be huge. Yes.
Hmm. Yeah, I think the interesting thing about AI at the moment, for the last 10 years nearly, we've been talking about the fourth industrial revolution, Industry 4.0. It hasn't really delivered on what people expected. And it feels like maybe that was because connectivity wasn't there and ingredient technologies like AI were not there to manage that huge amount of data that does come from the factory floor and that can be converted to maybe insert and value add there. Is that something you see? And do you think where we are with AI now is far enough forward that that's the game changer that can push us to that kind of model of self-healing factories, much more flexible, high mix, low volume manufacturing, and manufacturing that can be competitive in perhaps higher labor rate regions of the world?
Absolutely. I definitely think that contextual data understanding is this huge part of generative AI when it comes to the manufacturing space. So, in manufacturing spaces, from my experience, data can live across the business in these various silos. And if you go into these spaces and you have data living in proprietary systems, you have data living in data lakes or data warehouses. And you have people that are trying to understand how they can now take this mass historical amounts of data they've been sitting on for years and make it into something productive, effective, and as you said, something that can actually change the game for these sectors. So using generative AI to pull this data together into insights, into predictive forecasting models, or used for predictive maintenance. I mean, the possibilities are truly endless, but it all does come back to data and utilizing data for whatever it is that these manufacturing spaces need, whether it be anomaly detection
Hmm.
or, like I said, making sense of that historical data to really drive forward where they can now pivot or take that next step into being a more proactive instead of reactive environment.
Mm. Yeah, I think the predictability is really interesting, and I'm fascinated. We're in a phase at the moment in particularly in electronic manufacturing, where we have a bit of a downturn, which is the result of an inventory bubble working its way through post-pandemic. So this kind of what the industry or what supply chain refers to as a bullwhip effect, where it's worked its way through the supply chain. There was too much inventory in the EMS, the outsourcing companies. Now that's with the OEMs, and consumers have slowed down their buying habits. I'm curious to see kind of next time we see this cycle, if people are using generative AI or AI generally, whether we're going to have greater prediction in terms of demand, and whether we're going to be able to connect that kind of those demand signals all the way from consumer right through the manufacturing supply chain. Perhaps a little bit like we're seeing start to happen in the fast fashion industry, for example. Do you think that's something that AI can help with?
100%. Yeah, I think that it's interesting you bring up the fast fashion cycle. A lot of what I do on generative AI 101 is I try to make sense of how the field of artificial intelligence and then these subfields, right, of narrow AI and generative AI, they play such a role across industries and they can do similar things in similar spaces. So when you start to look at how generative AI can impact spaces like fast fashion, and then how you can do this kind of linear frame of how that would impact manufacturing, right? From design optimization, so enhanced creativity, but this ability to rapid prototype, and then the added ability to just accelerate design cycles. So you've got this now faster time to market that totally models itself against that fast fashion trend. And then you have the supportive use that can enhance itself, or you have a more efficient use of materials. So I always use, so when I go into small and medium-sized manufacturing spaces, we definitely talk about that, how what's happening in one industry can model into yours. And when
Mm,
I talk to them about this idea of material use efficiency, we talk about the idea of constructing this analogy of a grocery list. And I will sometimes actually pull up Chat GPT because it's just like the Kleenex of generative AI. Everyone knows what it
yeah.
is. And so we pull that up and I say, all right, let's make a grocery list and let's look at how we can prompt it to say, I want to make a grocery list for a family of 4 for 5 days. And I want you to make the list of ingredients really work together so that there's limited waste. And I say, now take such a simple concept and model it into your space using this
Mm,
idea of the materials you have, the tier one machinery you have, and how you now can use this to creatively prototype to the constraints and limitations of your environment. And
yeah.
I've worked in spaces where we've taken things like 2D image generations, okay, 2D flat. We then move it into 3D modeling
Mm,
software. We inject it with a few different things. Sometimes you're working interchangeably between Photoshop and other AI software. And ultimately, you're getting to a space where you can create this 3D model prototype that can move into a CAD space and become either a 3D printed prototype, or you can move it into the assembly and it's taking a week instead of taking months. Um,
yeah.
so it's all there, but going back to it, yeah, you can really see that correlation between what happens in one industry with AI and how that models into another industry, this being fast fashion into the
Into
manufacturing sector.
manufacturing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? And as you say, there are those parallels across. And I think when I look at the people that are capable of providing support in this, I look at people that have kind of two sets of skills. One is the understanding and ability to use AI and to have that vision of what it can actually do. But the other is the domain knowledge to understand what's actually going on in the factory that we're looking at. Are they the is that the key combination that you think are the skill sets people need to actually make use of this?
I would say so. So that feeds into two things that I often talk about, both in industry spaces and in higher education spaces. So, thing one, whether you're a faculty member or you're in the C-suite of your organization, you need to understand what generative AI is and what it can do. And if you don't understand that, you're not in the game at all. Okay.
Yeah.
The same goes for higher education and faculty. If you don't understand what it can do, you're limited by either stunting students' use of it in your classes or enabling students to use it in more effective ways. But then you get into foundational knowledge. This works in both spaces. You have to understand how your manufacturing space works inside and out. If you're consulting in a space, typically when I do work like that, I'm bringing with me engineers or people who are more skilled in some of those spaces who understand maybe the machine learning components of a tier one machine that I wouldn't understand, right? But you
Mm.
have foundational knowledge. And I think that's one of the things that people have to keep in mind as well, because when you go into a lot of manufacturing spaces, that comes with a lot of NDAs and a lot of proprietary knowledge. And so you also have these spaces where people don't always understand that there are environments where you're not going to introduce generative AI in its truest form, in your chat GPTs, in your Anthropic's Claude, because you're working with proprietary data and proprietary systems. So that goes
Mm.
all the way back to AI literacy. What is Gen AI? What can it do? How does it integrate into systems effectively? And then what are the limitations and risks? So that's all there. And understanding and being
Mm.
able to unpack all that and how you then integrate and inject that into a specific industry is a few different skills. And a lot of times it's more than just one person, it's a collaborative effort across your team.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to switch to that human aspect of it. When we talk about AI, we often talk about this idea of a co-pilot, where, the skill in using generative AI particularly is what you prompt, and what you do with the result and how you decide how accurate or correct that result if it needs correcting. Um, when you're working with a university, when you're looking at developing those skills, how do you think about that relationship between AI and the person prompting it?
Well, I mean, there's a lot to unpack with that, but so the first thing is with AI, I think one thing that people don't understand about generative AI is there always has to be this human in the loop. Okay. There's always someone that's actively engaged with or involved with the AI. You're never going to turn on a generative AI system and just let it loose and never come back to it. That's just not how that works. You're always
Hmm.
working fairly in tandem with it. So in a university system, or in a higher education system, when you're introducing it to the space, you're thinking about general literacy from the standpoint of what are the most basic skills someone needs to engage with AI systems based on what they are, based on what generative AI can do, right? From text to image to speech to video to music, whatever it might be. To now we've got what coding is really taken off. 3D modeling is really taking off with the physics that are going into these systems. So now we understand the basic literacy people need to have. And then to build on that, that's when you start to look at a framework that's going to bring more industry specific skills into the fray. So you're going to look at if someone's going into the manufacturing or engineering sector, they're going to need to understand maybe more code space and how that works, the 3D modeling space, the image recognition software is super beneficial. And then you're understanding how that's going to pipe into other AI systems, whether it be machine learning, deep learning, and then the two big ones that are really coming in that are kind of all part of this mix are virtual reality and augmented reality. And those are
Mm.
playing bigger spaces every day in the manufacturing sector and sectors across the industry. So as you can
Yeah.
see, as I walk you through it, it's a tiered
Mm.
approach. It starts with
Yeah.
foundational knowledge. It's then slowly building and injecting in what are these primary skills, and then what are the skills that are dependent on the industry or focus.
Yeah. And it's having that ability to adapt quickly because things are moving so fast in the AI space. What's been
Yeah.
interesting in the last couple of years in the manufacturing space, particularly in the US, but also in Europe, where labor's high cost is, the skill shortage and people thinking about using AI to actually grow their business without necessarily growing their headcount as one part of it. But as the market's kind of shifted a little bit, that concern has waned, and people have started to think more about what does AI mean in terms of impacting our labor force, impacting the people. What is the effect with respect to one, jobs, but two, actually taking the skills that are perhaps tribal knowledge, getting them into the AI, and what impact that has. Is that something you think about a lot as you go through these different paths? And is that something people are constantly asking you about?
Yes. No, it is. Anytime I go into a space, and I'm every day, I'm somewhere talking about something. And now it is really transitioned into this idea of, it's always been, is AI going to take my job? Always. And I always respond, yes, you specifically, AI is going to take your job. It called me last night. It told me it's going to take your job 100%. So, but no, but you have to have this humor to it because you're just,
Yeah, of
you know,
course.
it's coming. You know, it's coming
Yeah.
as soon as you open it up to questions. But I think that I try to look at it in two ways. Yes, we are going to see an influx of agentic AI come into spaces. We're seeing trends come out of Microsoft and Salesforce where there's this ability to integrate and do a lot more with AI systems when you put them together. And a lot of it reminds me of, like we talked about earlier, that modeling of industry. And you look in the manufacturing sector and you look at robotic process automation and how you can feed all this extensive data into a system and it can learn and it can react. The same thing's going to happen with AI agents and enterprise systems where I don't always know if they'll get to a point anytime soon where they'll be smart enough to take jobs away. We've seen some of this in the customer service sector, and we've all got really good at yelling like representative into our phone when things get annoying. But will they get good enough to actually start taking higher level jobs? I don't predict any time soon. The one thing I do tell people is in the United States, especially, we love to say, I wear many hats. I wear
Mm,
many hats. It's this point of pride. Oh, I work at this company, but I wear many hats. So I dabble in the space. My hope is that AI and generative AI can get us to a space where you don't wear many hats, where you wear the hat you were supposed to wear when you were hired into this company. And the
yeah.
AI takes on the work that you didn't need to take on. You didn't need to take on the marketing. You didn't need to take on the social media. You didn't need to take on the technical writing on top of all the other things you're doing just to be an engineer in the space, right? You can just have that one hat. So I'm
Mm,
optimistic that, and you have to stay optimistic in some of this because if you dabble too far into the dark side, it does get kind of concerning. But as we keep watching the evolution of these systems and we see agentic AI come in, I think we're going to see some wins. We're going to see some shifts, but ultimately they have to be good enough to outpace a human. And
mm,
if we still continue to see hallucinations at the scale that we do, or inaccuracies pop up, safety and risk, bringing those onto a system, they'll nip that because it's not
mm.
worth it. It's not
Yeah.
worth the one time that your robot malfunctions and causes a situation that's irreparable. So it's give and take, but it's going to keep evolving and it's going very fast.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And when I think about that, and I don't want to go too long, but when I think about that, what I think is interesting is as we take that tribal knowledge and we train the AI and we use the AI to do tasks and maybe co-pilot for the next generation as they come through, there's a concern that we perhaps don't train some of those new people in the tribal knowledge because we're training the AI and we're relying on the AI. So I think we're yet to kind of figure out exactly how we work this triangle of the gray hairs with the expertise and the tribal knowledge alongside the AI co-pilot, alongside the new recruits that are coming into the industry that need to go through some of those processes for training. So I think there's a fascinating mix there going forward, and that's part of the
Yeah.
development and educational process.
Well, a solution for that is AI customized training. So a lot of spaces are actually engaging with the onboarding of generative AI solutions to
Mm,
provide that customized training, personalized knowledge sharing. So you can actually take with systems like HeyGen, Synthesia. So these are text to video generation systems. You could provide someone customized training. You could create documentation that walks people through things. And then the benefit to that is because the whole GPT, a generative pre-trained transformer, a transformer was originally developed by Google to be a translation model. Okay. And all the
Mm.
models we have now are just variations of that. So we have this tech that's prime for multilingual environments where we can not only train, we can train in any language we need to. We have the idea to, or the ability to craft images, but also use generative AI through augmented reality, through things that, the next thing we're seeing is vision assistance. So we have
Mm.
people in manufacturing or picking spaces that are wearing Team Viewer has one that I've seen that's really great. You wear it, it's an augmented reality system, and it can actually help you identify different parts on a machine, different products you
Mm.
need to pick. We also now have this space where any company can take that tribal knowledge and integrate it into a RAG system or a retrieval augmented generation system. And you have your own in-house proprietary knowledge base that anyone in your company could naturally language engage with. And as we
Mm.
see these systems continue to evolve, you don't have to just sit and type into it, because I think typing is totally archaic. Eventually, we'll get to a point where all these systems will be multimodal and have a voice mode, and your
Mm.
company will have a voice brand and a persona that anyone could sit with and chat with and train with at any given time. So manufacturers can use AI systems to just rapidly showcase a new hire how to service a machine, or they could use augmented reality or virtual reality, like I said, to help really show them how they're going to go about fixing something, how they're going to go about understanding operational procedures, so on and so forth. So
Yeah.
these tools could also circumvent the training issues.
Yeah, and it becomes that customized tutor. I'm constantly being bombarded with Makes You Fluent or Jump Speak or any of
Yeah.
those companies that have customized language tuition. But the idea of customized tuition, um, I think is hugely valuable, that they can teach someone at their own pace. They can teach someone in their own style. People have different communication styles. People learn in different ways, so it's hugely valuable. Emily, I'm going to take a leaf out of your book and not go on for too long. Um, Thanks so much for spending time with me today. Absolutely keep doing what you're doing. I think I've got 3 of your episodes on regulation and so forth to catch up on. I've been bogged down listening to pre-election podcasts for the last week or so. So I'm going to take some time to catch up on those. But in the meantime, thanks for talking to me, and look forward to chatting again soon. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.